Is it possible there was a fatal flaw in the evidence stacked against O.J. Simpson? It's been 30 years since the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, and nearly that long since O.J. was acquitted. That leaves a long time for lots and lots of people to re-examine the evidence, and they have. There are some who have reached surprising conclusions because one huge problem with evidence itself, which we need to think about because it actually can be applied to matters of faith, and we're going to do that. Welcome, everyone. I'm Brett, and I've been a pastor for a long time, and here at One Life, we love engaging in cultural conversations from a Christ-centered worldview with believers as well as unbelievers. And if that sounds like the kind of thing that you'd enjoy, join our community by subscribing and hitting the like button. I will admit I've read more than my fair share of the content about the O.J. murders, not to mention watching tons of documentaries, listening to interviews, reading transcripts of court testimony, and I've got to watch it all unfold in real time when I was 29 years old.
It's ancient history.
I have a deep fascination with the subject of evidence itself, and I label myself as an evidentialist in matters of faith. The O.J. Simpson saga is a case study in both the strength of evidential thinking and its weaknesses. And this is important because we talk directly about evidence for believing the Christ-centered worldview on this channel a lot, and some have commented that that's not evidence at all. Let's take a look at the O.J. Simpson case to see what evidence actually is, how it points to possibilities, and how it can be flawed. For those who may not be familiar with the case, two people that I mentioned earlier were viciously murdered on the night of June 12, 1994. It very quickly became apparent that all the evidence pointed to O.J. Simpson as a killer. Now, this ignited like this cultural obsession with the case because O.J. was a very well-known and liked celebrity. The only close comparison I can make is imagine someone like Peyton Manning being accused of double murder.
Oh, no, you didn't, girl.
Now, what evidence pointed to him? Now, here's a quick but not a complete list. O.J. had an undeniable history of domestic abuse, which includes police coming to his house at least 8 times for that reason. One of those times, Nicole ran out to officers and yelled out, "He's going to kill me." She confided to friends that she feared for her life. After the murders, detectives called Nicole's family to tell them that she had been killed, and one of her sisters was heard yelling in the background, "O.J. killed her. He did it." The murders themselves were described by police as classic overkill. In other words, whoever did it was obviously acting out of rage, not like a calculated hit or robbery or something gone wrong like that. Simpson had no verifiable alibi for the time of the murders. He said he was running around getting ready and was at some point hitting golf balls. His limousine driver, who showed up early to take him to the airport, testified that when he arrived to pick him up, the house was dark and no one was home. The driver's timeline was affirmed by call records. The killer left behind a knit cap, and inside it were hairs consistent with Simpson's. There were fibers on the cap that matched the carpet fiber in Simpson's now infamous white Ford Bronco. Hairs consistent with Simpson were found on the victim, Ron Goldman. There was also a glove left behind at the murder scene, and the other one was found on Simpson's property. And the gloves weren't the kind that the average person would own anyway. They were Aeroslite extra large leather gloves, the same kind confirmed to be purchased by Nicole Simpson a couple years before that at Bloomingdale's in New York. There were only 300 pairs of them sold that year. And the gloves had Simpson's and both of the victims' blood on them. Now, when the murder scene was discovered, before any suspects were even considered, investigators knew that they were looking for someone who was bleeding from his left hand. There were literal bloody footprints leading away from the crime scene with blood drops from an obvious wound on the hand of whoever did it. Well, the next day, when the police saw O.J. for the first time, he had cuts on his left hand and he had obviously bled. There were at least 10 DNA matches to Simpson's blood in the Bronco, along with matches to Nicole and Ron. Now, my favorite piece of evidence is the shoe. This is what was thought to have wrapped up this whole civil trial. Again, there were footprints in the blood walking away from the scene. Detectives could immediately tell that they were looking for someone who wore a size 12 shoe and was pigeon-toed. O.J. is a size 12, and yep, he is pigeon-toed. Later, they confirmed the soles were from a comparatively rare brand of designer shoes called Bruno Magli's. Then they found the Bruno Magli shoe print in blood inside the Bronco. O.J. could have saved everybody a lot of trouble just by videoing himself doing this.
It's done. It's on film.
After all that, they found a trail of blood into his house. Then when they came to the civil trial, they showed him a picture of himself in the Bruno Magli shoes that he claimed he never owned. But if all that weren't enough, he released a confession in the form of a book called If I Did It, which is like this super creepy, hypothetical account of him telling how things went down. Watch the Judith Regan interview we link in the description. He keeps slipping in and out of hypothetical and into real. It's bizarre. Besides, if you were accused of double murder and you knew you didn't do it, what planet do you have to be from to release a thing called If I Did It?
What planet are you from?
Now, the evidence was so overwhelming, his defense attorneys basically said he was framed, which is a tacit admission that all the evidence is pointing to him, right? But we know the story. He was found not guilty. That reveals the fatal flaw of evidence itself. Evidence has to run through the grid of people and their interpretations. Now, I've noticed over the last 30 years, with all the evidence and much more, there's still an entire industry of people saying Simpson didn't do it, and they've decided what really happened. Evidence is only as good as its interpreters. The ideal, and this is what we strive for in criminal trials, is jurors and judges who try their best to be objective. That means they rid themselves of their prior biases and they hear evidence with dispassionate rationality, fairness, and commitment to the truth. But in OJ's case, jurors have since admitted that their motivations were not objectivity. One juror is on record as saying that it was payback for Rodney King. Others have said it's not so much that they didn't think he was guilty, they just thought the prosecutors did a bad job of presenting the case. Here's a legal definition for evidence. Evidence is an item or information preferred to make the existence of a fact more or less probable. Evidence can take many forms: testimony, documents, photographs, videos, voice recordings, DNA testing, blood splatter patterns, fibers, hair, how bodies are positioned when found. But keep in mind, nearly anything can be evidence if relevant to the question that you're trying to answer. But it only functions that way when those looking at it are interested in the truth, no matter what that truth happens to be. We posted a video where philosopher of science Stephen Meyer, while talking to Joe Rogan, called himself an evidentialist, and he gave some of his evidence for believing the resurrection. Now, one example he used was that the cast of characters that the Gospels insist were at the center of Jesus' trial and crucifixion, like Caiaphas and Pontius Pilate, have now been affirmed by archaeological and historical records. And we had several people comment,
That's not evidence.
well, of course it is, because it's relevant to the question of Jesus' resurrection. Proof of that is that for a long time, it was considered the opinion of scholarship that Pontius Pilate was not affirmed by archaeological records until he was. That absence of historical record was used as evidence against the reliability of the Gospels. So when things shifted, it's perfectly legitimate to see it as evidence for the reliability of the Gospels. Does that one fact prove that Jesus rose again from the dead? Well, no, but it goes into the column of reliable testimony. All evidential cases are cumulative cases. The fact that OJ didn't have an alibi didn't mean he was guilty. It counts as one win in the column pointing towards his guilt. We believe the resurrection because of multiple facts point to the direction of it happening, small facts and larger ones. But the OJ case shows that the piles and piles and piles of evidence, which all seem to point in one direction, can be used to point to other directions depending on who's interpreting it. Does that mean that evidence is meaningless? Well, of course not. Our justice system believes people can truly choose to be objective enough to reach reliable and reasonable conclusions. That's how jurors are coached to think as they weigh evidence. Evidence is genuinely useful, especially in matters of faith, but it's only useful when handled by people who have as their pursuit truth as their highest object. Let's be people like that. For more on this in matters of evaluating faith claims, check out this video. It's called Can Faith and Doubt Coexist? Hope that helps. See you next time.